Hello, this is Father David, here with day 38 of Great Lent 2023. This meditation today comes from St. Matthew the Poor in the book Orthodox Prayer Life, The Interior Way. And this is a bit of a longer excerpt, but it really also informs what we talked about yesterday, about silent contemplation of the mystery of the Passion and Holy Week. Because sometimes, and especially I think in the contemporary West, we tend to judge anything based on how it made us feel. How did my prayer make me feel? How did the sermon make me feel? How did that action or that conversation with someone make me feel? And we tend to judge the validity of things based on how did that Holy Week and Pascha make me feel? Was I overjoyed? Was I ecstatic? Was I excited? And this can oftentimes lead people to real despair if they go to their prayer corner and after a few days or a season, they realize, I have felt no emotion. I have experienced no noticeable pleasure in my prayer. Perhaps you will attempt to go through Holy Week and experience no chill bumps down your spine. You will experience perhaps no emotional payoff, okay? But I would ask you, not as a means of lowering expectations, because ultimately an emotional payoff should not be our goal. It should not be what we strive for. Sometimes it can and does occur, and it's beautiful. But listen to Matthew the Poor's words about growing up in prayer, maturing in prayer as we take into account what he calls spiritual aridity or dryness. He said, when the soul enters into the trial of spiritual aridity or dryness for the first time, it becomes extremely dismayed. This is especially true if there was a disciplined devotion to worship in sincerity of heart. One begins to be troubled and to wonder why this has happened, and to look for the faults that may be the cause. But spiritual aridity is not a sign of any kind of failure in a healthy relationship with God. It is only an important phase that the soul has to undergo, which may be regarded as a kind of pruning to prepare the soul for a more advanced spiritual life, not contingent upon psychological incentives or subjective pleasures. It is therefore wrong to be upset during the phase of aridity or dryness. It's also wrong to stop praying on the pretext of finding no pleasure in prayer. For aridity is a living part of the very nature of prayer. It is able, if we accept it with contentment and understanding, to raise us to the higher stage of pure prayer, which is not contingent on emotions, sentiments, or incentives of any kind. Thus, when you feel that grace seems to have abandoned you, be content with its hidden action. Rely instead on the strength and the impetus previously gained from your life with God. The best thing to do is to accept aridity as it is and to persist in spiritual activity with calm and awareness. Allow yourself to exert every effort to keep on progressing at the speed of one who travels across the desert and is never deterred by the pleasures of the city he has left behind, from striding across the arid wilderness until he reaches his destination. Spiritual trials in general are not undergone for the sake of attaining perfection, for this implies a sense of self-deification, making ourselves God. Rather, we should submit to the sovereign purposes of God so that we may fulfill his will. For our obedience to God is the foundation of our life with him, and it is only this that leads us to perfection. So really, with spiritual dryness, in a sense, this provides us with a realistic view of our own limitations. Again, with this, we speak about humility, and then, we speak about silence within the sense of holy. We can just simply soaking in what God has done for us. And yet, now we also need to hear that God, if he is working with us and through us, will begin to train us. Or in a sense, perhaps in this case, the training wheels will start to come off. Just like in riding a bike, when the training wheels come off, now there is an expectation of moving into a more mature approach to that activity. That this is where perhaps we're going to come to the realization that I've been praying to get something out of it. Whether that's psychological stability, or whether that is perhaps affirmation of what I want to be true and affirmed. But when those supports are, kicked out from under us, are we still able to come to him in humility, as we said, and prayer? These are the difficult disciplines of Christian prayer and discipleship, being a disciple, a disciplined student of the Lord. This is where it gets difficult, not fun, but simply a daily discipline that we do. And as I always mention in these contexts, Amma Syncletica, one of the Desert Mothers, who likens prayer in one of my favorite and oft repeated metaphors, which perhaps I've even said it in an earlier video, this Lent. I say it often enough. But it is like rubbing sticks together to make a fire. And at first you're working up a sweat because you have your two sticks and trying to make a spark, or work a flintstone if you've ever done that, or rubbing the sticks together in order to create friction and a spark. And at first, she says, all you're doing is working up a sweat, and there's smoke, and it gets in your eyes and the back of your throat, and it chokes you. And you don't seem to be making any progress. But then there's a spark. And then there's heat and light and comfort. That this is very often what it is like to develop a life of prayer. To do so without immediate and constant validation, but to realize that God is still accompanying you, alongside you, and has not forgotten you, even in the midst of your experience of an emotional silence. So if this is where you are, Continue on. You are not alone. This is not the first time that an Orthodox Christian has had to push through and persevere in terms of a life of prayer. And we know through the saints, all of whom have had to go through this as well, that there is relief and refreshment and joy that goes beyond mere sentiment, mere emotionalism. But there is a peace that passes all understanding, that comes to a heart that seeks after God without, not for emotional payout, but out of a love for who God is and a desire to unite with him. So God bless you. Lord willing, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.